Hello, everybody. Welcome to our conversation as part of Docaviv's January docu-stream program. We're pleased to host the director and protagonist of 1,000 Cuts, Ramona Diaz. I'm pointing at a woman in this part of my screen, and Maria Ressa. Ramona being the filmmaker and Maria being the protagonist. The film is available to stream on Docaviv's site. We invite you to leave your questions in the Q&A feature of Zoom instead of the chat. A few words about the film just to bring everybody on board. We're assuming that you saw the film, but we know that it's streaming all month and some of you may tune into this recorded conversation later. I'm going to read from the synopsis. Nowhere is the worldwide erosion of democracy fueled by social media disinformation campaigns more starkly evident than in the authoritarian regime of Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte. Journalist Maria Ressa places the tools of the free press and her own freedom on the line in defense of truth and democracy. Produced, written, and directed by Ramona Diaz. That was the short synopsis version. I saw the film. I was blown away by both of you and the coming together of both of you in this work. And I'm extremely grateful to be able to have this conversation with you. Just a few words about the film. 1,000 Cuts was premiered a year ago. Mazal Tov, your baby is a year old, at Sundance in January 2020. It was released in virtual cinemas across the US in August and continues to screen at festivals around the world. It recently also aired on Frontline PBS, and our home-based cinephile headed by Filippo Kowalski is overseeing world sales. I also believe it's contending for the Academy Awards.
We won the Gothams 2 weeks ago.
I saw you won the Gotham Award for Best Documentary Feature. The IDA awarded you the Truth to Power Award. I can't think of a protagonist who more just boom, that's a perfect fit. New York Times critics pick. A few words about Ramona and Maria, and we will jump to give you guys background and we will jump into the conversation. Ramona Diaz is an award-winning Asian American filmmaker whose films have screened at Sundance, Berlin, Tribeca, South by Southwest, IDFA, Hot Docs, and many more. Her first film, Imelda, about former Philippine First Lady Imelda Marcos, premiered and won an award at Sundance. Her next film, Motherland, also won an award at Sundance in 2017 and was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award and a Peabody. Ramona also became a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in 2016. Maria Ressa, a journalist for nearly 35 years, Ressa co-founded Rappler after a lot of other things, and we'll get to what else happened before Rappler, a digital news site that is leading the fight for press freedom in the Philippines. As Rappler's executive editor and CEO, Maria has endured constant political harassment and arrest by the Duterte government. For her courage and work on disinformation, Maria was named Time Magazine's 2018 Person of the Year and was among its 100 most influential people of 2019, and has also been named one of Time's most influential women of the century. And having seen the film, it's clear why. So we're going to start with the basics and hopefully in this short time frame dive as deep as we can because there's so much to talk about. But the basics, Ramona, what drew you to filmmaking and to Filipino and Filipino-American stories specifically?
To filmmaking. Rachel, I love the process of filmmaking. I love the collaboration and being on the field. It's actually my most favorite part of the entire process. You know, as you know, it goes on forever in a way, right? Just when you think it's over, it's not over. But being out there, in production is what I love. I was very young when I saw Francois Truffaut's Day for Night, right? And it's not even his most, it's one of his more mainstream films, but I remember I was like around 9 or 10 when I saw that. And that film really is a film about making a film. And I saw, and of course that was fiction, and all these like adults get together and do this thing. It just seemed like so much fun to me. And that's what drew me to filmmaking. And of course, then, you know, storytelling in the medium is like nothing else, as you know. And documentary filmmaking, life unfolding
And have you always done documentary, or did you sort of try your hand at both?
I tried a hand at both. I started in fiction, actually, and I'm circling back right about now. We'll see. There might be another documentary that I'm going to do in April. I'm going to start in April, but yeah, absolutely. But this is my fifth feature doc. So, but the way I film is very immersive. It's life unfolding in front of the lens. It's not knowing where the story is going. It's always being sort of at the precipice. You don't know what's going to happen, which to me is very exciting. And I feel like, and of course, fiction to me is the opposite. You know exactly where you're going to go. Most of the time, you know how to get from A to B to C to D. With documentary filmmaking, I mean, the types that I do, you don't. And I think that's what's so exciting. I also get a front seat to witness history and to truly be walk, not in Maria's shoes, for example, but walk beside her and see what that's like, one step removed, but still really exciting. And so, I'm Filipino. I was born and raised in the Philippines. So all my films are most or less based, happen in the Philippines and here, both in the US and in the Philippines.
So it sounds like you're saying that you took on a field called film or documentary film, but that in itself is dynamic over the course of one's lifetime. And I would then move this question to you, Maria, because you've had a very dynamic or made some big transitions within the field we call journalism. So the question to you would be, what was no, that's not the question. What drew you to journalism? You can tell us about your background and training, and then take us to the founding of Rappler, and what were your goals at the time? How have they changed with your experience?
I mean, I came back to the Philippines. I was born here. I left when I was 10 years old. My family took us, and martial law had been declared, and we moved to Toms River, New Jersey. And I never knew what being Filipino meant. And when I graduated college, I came back on a Fulbright fellowship to try to figure out what that was, right? Because I didn't want to be a tourist. That was the 1986 People Power Revolt. That was an incredible time, right? So my 1 year here has been my life in many instances. I wound up staying after the fellowship was over. I started a company called Probe before the word startup was a word, and we started doing television documentaries weekly. 4 of us producing some 60 minutes every week. That was an insane time. And then CNN came along and in 87 said, we want to hire you as a reporter. I initially turned it down because I didn't want to be a reporter. I was a director and producer, and so I did. Then I was with CNN for almost 2 decades. I opened the Manila Bureau, and then I opened the Jakarta Bureau in 1995. I think it was such a privilege to really be kind of covering the shift of Southeast Asian countries to democracy, from authoritarian one-man rule to democracy in general. And then I decided that before I turned 40, I would choose home. I didn't know where home was. When I was with Filipinos, I felt American, and when I was with Americans, I felt Filipino. So I chose, when I turned 40, I chose to come home to the Philippines. And when did I come back? In 2005. So the end of 2004, the tsunami was my last story with CNN. I had just moved back to the Philippines, and then a tsunami hit, and CNN said, go back. I was like, if I go back, I'm not going to be able to come back to head this news group. So I stayed. I headed ABS-CBN News for 6 years. This is the group that has been shut down by President Duterte. The broadcast, the television franchise was taken away May 5th this year. So I did that for 6 years. And then in 2012, the end of 2011, I felt technology was taking power away in ways we didn't understand. And so this was the exploration. 4 or 5 of us above 40, we decided we're going to experiment. we'll try to, we created this thing called Rappler. We made up a name, which was different for a journalist. And then if it works, if it doesn't work, then okay, we only took a year off. We tried something. And if it does work, then let's see where it leads us. Well, it led here. So so this is now the beginning of the 9th year of Rappler, my 35th year as a journalist. And it has been an amazing ride.
So you go from the model of a kind of corporate media, you're heading the offices in Manila and Jakarta, you've got maybe 1,000 people working under you, and you move into this new domain, which you thought technology was a problem, but you also saw its potential because you saw where people were gathering their information in other ways, and that there was also democratic potential in that, to the same extent that we will then discuss later down the road. It's a double-edged sword, right? But you're battling it out within that domain. And you make a very bold choice. Rappler, I guess I would say, when print journalism, it becomes in the danger of being categorized as an extinct species, you kind of create a business model, which is to a large extent what's also carrying you through, even though you guys are very vulnerable out there. You've managed to also, you can hold your own. A word or two about that, and then we'll.
I don't know whether it's a blessing or a curse to be where I am today, which is, in less than 2 years, I've had 10 arrest warrants. Me personally, Rappler has had 9 criminal cases filed against it. I get 1 extra. I guess it's extra credit, so I don't know whether I actually think some days I wake up and I think it's an incredible privilege, because when you're in the trenches, when you're the one being attacked online in particular, right? So starting in 2016, I began warning democracies around the world that what is happening in the Philippines is coming soon to you. And it did. Our dystopian present was going to be yours. And I felt like, because of that, I understood disinformation. I understood technology. I understood how, E.O. Wilson said this, the American biologist. He said that the biggest crisis we have right now is our Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Little journalism is going through a massive transformation because our task is to hold power to account. How can we do that when lies laced with anger and hate spreads faster on the distribution platforms? Facebook distributes the most news in the world, right? So I know that what we do today makes a difference. I also know that it's forcing us to be more agile, more creative, more courageous than at any other time. But when that happens, you know exactly who you are and why you do what you do.
I really want to continue with this thread of digital citizenship, which I find utterly fascinating. And it's a conversation that can bring everybody who's here, all these virtual people watching us or who will be watching us. But before I forget, I just want to press pause on that for a second and go back to the incarnation of the film itself. So Ramona, if I heard you correctly, you're born in the Philippines, you're based in the US. If I heard you correctly, Maria, you're born in the US, now you're based in the Philippines. In some ways, you guys become mirror versions of each other. You both contain this bothness and this neither here nor there-ness, right? And I'm sure that there was a lot of affinity in that encounter. But if you can just tell us a little bit, Ramona, about the genesis of 1,000 Cuts, why Maria, why the story of press freedom in the Philippines?
Yeah, so Rachel, everything you just said is so true. We do have like sort of parallel lives, but opposite lives. But the thing is, Maria was born in the Philippines. She moved to the States when she was 10. So that's the only thing. But everything else, yes. More than anyone else, I think I've filmed. I always say I would have been friends with Maria even if I didn't film her. So what drew me back to the Philippines? What drew me back to the Philippines was the drug war. When President Duterte assumed the office in 2016, he started the drug war immediately. Well, he campaigned on it. He said, I will fill, I'm paraphrasing here, but I will fill Pasig River, the river that runs through the city, with bodies. The fish will be so happy, or something. I am paraphrasing, but that was the idea. It was a campaign promise, and he did it, and there were bodies in the streets. So Having been raised under martial law, I felt it was so regressive, something was happening and alarming. And I saw the pictures, it was really, really alarming. So I went back to the Philippines to see, I wanted to make a film about it. But as you know, Rachel, these things attract a lot of people. So a lot of people wanted to make a film about it. And I then looked around. At that point, I said, okay, I still want to make this film. There's something happening in this country under this man. And what is it? And Rappler and Maria, we're questioning the drug war. We're questioning the numbers. But more than that, Maria was connecting it to the weaponization of social media, right? And the intersectionality of social media, impunity, the drug war, all of it. And explaining it really clearly as you see in the film. And I thought, wow, that's the film. You know, when you know it's a film, it's like, ding, something happens. And I knew it would also make it more global, although it had to be very specific. It's still specifically Duterte in the Philippines, but it's very global because of disinformation. And you know it, so you follow that story. So that's how it began, really. And
it isn't necessarily that you set out to make a film about press freedom. You set out, though, to make a film about speaking truth to power. And if I can quote you, Maria, you have this fantastic quote from this interview that I saw a conversation, really, between the two of you, where you say, in the battle over fact, journalism is activism. And in a sense, you come at it as an activist documentarian, and you're coming at journalism now as an activist journalist. And I think that, you know, we all hesitate to attach activism to our professional title at the same time that we sort of know that that's what it's about. It's about trying to do something in the world that is positive. Yeah. Ramona comes to you, Maria. You may or may not have seen her prior films. There's a what makes you trust her to follow you when you're in such a vulnerable situation, and or did you know each other prior? I mean, just a little background on the coming together.
Yeah, you know, I did know Ramona's work. Imelda was, and I had actually asked to interview her in 2004, a long time ago. And the first question I asked her when she came to the office to ask if she could follow us was, why did you say no to my request for an interview? She turned me down for an interview. That's how I know Ramona. And then
wait, that was in 2004 when Maria was like CNN in Southeast Asia. I turned her down because I heard she didn't like the film, and I just didn't want to talk to her. Anyway, that was it. Yes.
But you know, the reason, and it's funny that this is almost all our conversations revolve around this idea of, you know, when is silence complicity? And that is part of my life. That's how I found, when I was arrested the first time and detained overnight, you know, it made me realize that I needed to speak, that I can't take a step back and just be a reporter. I'm an actor in this. And frankly, this is, so anyway, that's how, this is a conversation we have all the time. But I guess, you know, in this context of how to speak truth to power, it's the mission of journalism has never been as important. You can see in the reporters of Rappler, our median age is 23 years old. We're about 100 people. We're 63% female. And so I'm very protective of Rapplers, but that the courage to be a journalist at this time, that spirit is really burning bright inside Rappler. And I think that we're going to be the future of journalism in our country. We're building it right now. So that makes me happy in its way. Sorry, I didn't answer your question.
Why'd you say yes, Maria?
Oh yeah, why did I say yes? So aside from that, you know, she did respond. I asked her, why did you say no to the interview? And she can tell you why she said no. But one, she was honest. So that's really important to me because I don't have time. I don't have time to sugarcoat anything. And I don't like it when people aren't straightforward and don't tell you the truth, right? And the second thing I think is for both Filipino-Americans, it's rare that I'm around Filipino-Americans. And the third part was there was a very real need to document what was going on to us. Already by 2016, I felt something had changed. And I've been covering news 35 years, right? And there's a period of time when I felt like there are only 8 major themes for every story you can do, right? The Power of Myth. Joseph Campbell wrote that book. But now I felt in 2016, there was something fundamentally different when the attacks against us began online, and then it came top down. So bottom up and top down. I was like, okay, then it became dangerous. And that was around the time when Ramona showed up. And we didn't have the resources, and it's time. So I was like, okay, not only is she a filmmaker, I can trust her.
No, it certainly seems that Rappler was sort of thrust into the position of what you would call a reflexive documentary in our field, where you're simultaneously providing information of the world in general, and you're having to constantly analyze and also dissect the information of disinformation and the disinformation of against your own information providing, and so you get like sort of, and it seems that you guys have done an incredible job on that front. So I would take the next question to this direction. The film obviously is about Maria and journalism, but it's also about social media. Let's sort of go back to that place where we were sort of on to that track about the question of digital citizenship, if you will. You quote in the film a staggering figure regarding the Philippines specifically and per capita internet and social media use. If you can remind me, I don't want to misquote it. So
100% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook. Facebook is our internet. And, for the 5th year running, and there's going to be a new survey out before the end of January, 5 years in a row, Filipinos have spent the most time on social media globally. So
day or something like that. There was right? There was
sorry, say again.
10 hours a day. There was some figure along those lines, right?
Yes, more than 10 hours a day at that time. Yeah.
Right. So, so that's where you want to be if you want to be providing information, period, and countering disinformation on top of it. So it seems that you do a lot of public speaking globally about the responsibility that tech has in our lives, these extra territorial, extra-national, transnational conglomerates, that basically are the public square in where ideas are exchanged and to a large extent power gets shifted. So the world is not safer now necessarily because Trump's accounts have been blocked. That goes without saying. Talk to me about digital citizenship and how, what would the responsibility of these, it seems to me that you're involved in ways of trying to, I'll phrase it differently because I know that we're going to be short of time. So I'm piling it on, but I think you can handle it. It's a double-edged sword, like we said earlier. It's an incredible tool and it can be weaponized. But the battle isn't over, and you still believe in the potential of this kind of social media and social networking, and are working on ways to figure out how to reharness it to a place that could be put to positive use. And if you could speak to that.
Yeah. So first, I think I've gone beyond where the film was, which is to say that, social media has become a behavior modification system. Right, the phones that you have, these things have layers on top of it. This hardware collects data on you. Then you have your Facebook, your Netflix, your Spotify, your Twitter. They're all here. They're all collecting data. And when there's like a model of you being built as you post, that model then takes an artificial intelligence takes that model and takes your most vulnerable moment to a message and feeds you to a company, advertising, or a government, propaganda. And then once it's fed to you, your response, whether you click or don't, keeps that perpetual machine going, right? So behavior modification system, reward and punishment, it's all here. And look at what's played out in the United States on January 6th, the Capitol Hill attacks, radicalized. So the platform, social media now, separates us against them, filter bubbles. We've known this for a while, but it also radicalizes. A 2016 Facebook report, this was in the Wall Street Journal, a 2016 Facebook report said that 64% of people who join extremist groups on Facebook were recommended. Facebook's own algorithms recommended the groups to you. So QAnon, think think about that, the growth. Imagine if we had stopped that in 2016, right? So right now, I would say if no action is taken, we have this dystopian present that we're living in, the poisoning, or since we're in the time of coronavirus, we have been infected with the virus of lies. Lies laced with anger and hate spreads faster and further. The platform that delivers news is biased against facts. It is biased against journalism. If you don't have facts, you can't have truth, you can't have trust, you can't have democracy. There is no human endeavor that you can do if you don't agree on facts and a shared reality. So this is an existential problem, I think, for the world, and we have to react the way we did in Hiroshima, after Hiroshima, right? We have to look at this as this pivotal moment, and it isn't just the coronavirus. We have to fix it.
So presumably we're like-minded women here, presumably, right? We each might have our slight differences. Each of us gets her own New York Times front page. Rappler, the same page. We get the same. Do we all get the same Rappler?
You do right now, because you look, I mean, even the kinds of micro-targeting of advertising, I mean, I don't know if that's, for journalists, that's not ethical. It's not transparent, right? Like, so I guess this is the problem. What are the guardrails? Where do morals begin? Like, when is it okay to manipulate so insidiously? And when will the impunity stop? I don't think I would be facing 6 years in prison if the disinformation networks hadn't been enabled. On September 22, Facebook took down 2 disinformation networks, influence operations. One was from China, the other from the Philippines, that was linked to the police and military. The one from China was targeting Americans, targeting Southeast Asia, targeting me. The one from the Philippines was also targeting me. I'm very small and short, and I'm just a journalist doing my job. Why are influence operations doing this? And why are the platforms enabling it?
Tell me how many, I don't know what the right terminology, subscribers, people, how many people come through Rappler on a given week, or I don't know how these things are measured. And feel that you're successfully providing media, but also media literacy because of this kind of reflexive place that you've been thrust into?
Yeah. So Rappler is, I told you we turned 9. January 1, we turned 9 years old. So next year will be our 10th anniversary. Holy cow. So we've turned 9 years old. Our monthly is about 10 to 12 million uniques per month, and page views, which is the way we're about 15 to 25 to 30 million. So depending on what it is, the hype, of course, the lockdown brought more people to the internet. So this is positive and negative. But I think the biggest problem really is that we have to restore facts, and we have to hold the people who do this for a living, who the governments that you do this as policy, as part of a military doctrine, they should be held accountable. This is information warfare.
I would go back to a quote that comes up in the film, which is, can't help but hit home for so many people. And it's terribly simple and obvious, but you're saying, I'm the lab, but this stuff is coming back, to you. I mean, that that there's a domino, and that we're all really part of, we're all part of the, so why should people outside of the Philippines and in the North, global North and global West or whatever, care? You should care because you should care. That's kind of obvious. But if you don't care, you should care because you're going to find it. You're going to find it on your front door anyway. So you might as well care now before it's too late, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see it in the film, right? Starting in 2016. I've started saying it. I now know how Sisyphus and Cassandra feel combined, because I really started jumping up and down in 2016 to say, what we are going through, this dystopian present is your dystopian future. And I mean, sadly, Silicon Valley sins have come home to roost. That is what you're seeing. You saw January 6th. You saw this in elections. You saw the radicalization of large swaths of American. It goes back to identity. And it's almost like it caters to the worst of human nature. Like the devil on your shoulder grew and your angel just died. That's the world that we live in. And so this needs to change because we have massive problems. Climate change, the virus, right? This is impossible to fix if we cannot agree on a shared set of facts. Simultaneously, by the way, global geopolitical power play. Israel would know this, right? This is happening all at the same time. Russia has included it as part of its military doctrine. China is moving forward. Iran, again, countries are using this. And there we are, the users being insidiously manipulated.
I'm going to shift the conversation over to Ramona because I think, you're a documentary filmmaker. You're not a journalist. You're a journalist and you ended up not being a documentary filmmaker. Thank God for the world because you're doing something huge. But we're also doing something because there's an interrelationship between what's out there, what's happening out there, and the act of documenting it and packaging it in that 1.5 hours and moving it in the world. I'd like to hear sort of your thoughts, Ramona, because you must have sort of been dealing with this. I assume you guys might have even conversed about it. What differentiates journalism from documentary, and where do our interests converge? But also where is what we do slightly different, and that there's room for all of it. It's all of a part, but there's room for all of it on the spectrum of looking at the world, of reflecting the world. Yeah.
And you're right. We've been talking about this for close to 2.5 years now. So yes, there is. There's a difference, but there's also, there's an intersection. I think what and there are very many different documentary filmmakers. So let me only speak for myself. What I do, I think what I do complements what journalism does. I said. Mine is a slow burn, right? It's slow food. I stay forever. I film for 2 years and I stay until we're told to get out already. And I think what I film, I always say I film behavior. I film how people react to situations. I don't ever claim objectivity because that's not the medium of film is not objective in itself. It resists objectivity, right? Because we are the ones actually directing the gaze of the people. That's what we do with directors. We choose how the story is told, in what manner. We choose how, down to the lens, down to who comes out, like who is in the film, right? I chose Maria. So it's not objective, but I think the one thing that is true about both journalism and documentaries, and it's sacrosanct, is that we do not tell lies, right? That is a contract with the audience. What I'm telling you is a truth or factual. I'm not putting words in Maria's mouth or editing it in such a way that it changes meaning. So that to me is sacrosanct. But do we use the power of narrative to move things around? Yes, we use that tool in film. We do it. I do it. But I think we complement what journalists do. We just do it in a different way. It's more or less like a long profile piece. If you have to compare it with something, a long profile piece in the New Yorker thing.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. But you actually see it, right? There's something about seeing people behaving in a certain way. What would you do? And I think, and it's not about messages for me either. It is about questioning the audience questioning themselves. What would they do if they were in Maria's place? What is your role in this world, right? If you were Maria, what would you do? It brings it home to you personally. I hopefully, that's always my intention, to be, I hate the way universal, but yeah, I guess, yes, universal. And also it is about the audience and how you react to it. It is about your experience of the film and not necessarily a message, because messages are fungible, right? It depends on your lived experience and all that. So I'm not prescriptive when it comes to messages.
One of the messages that definitely comes through in the film, which I relate to the last film that I worked on, which was also a very little woman with a lot of...
It's a great film. I love that film.
A much filthier mouth than yours. An angrier character, but somehow just as jovial and positive. She calls herself, I'm an angry, optimistic woman. She often gets touted as, talking about attorney Lat Sem, a human rights lawyer, she gets touted as fearless. And I always say, no, she is not fearless. Were she fearless, she'd be a psychopath.
That's great.
Someone who takes their fears and then walks into them, meets them head first, says, bring it on, but not bringing it on in a wacko way, just there's no choice. And so there was definitely something very familiar about your attitude. I say this as somebody who is much more fearful, much more fearful. And I also understood from her somehow something about social change that I hadn't understood, and I think you echo it as well, which is it's not really about the ends, because we never reach that better place. As a gospel song would have it, unless we die, but we're here on earth. We want to change things here and now. But what we do, it's really about the means. So you get up every morning, and I clearly see you do this, and you work to get to that better place, and then you collapse at night, or you never sleep that night, and you get up the next morning and you work again. And we'll never reach anywhere called better place if we don't go through the motions of going there, even though we never get there. And I really saw that in you, and there, you know, corny, simplistic, whatever, it really is inspiring. It really is inspiring. And that is universal, Ramona. It is. It's universal. There isn't a single society that doesn't need its Maria Ressas, its Cassandras and Sisyphus, as you called it. As far as I'm concerned, we could keep talking all day. You have to sleep. You have to wake up. Other people might start.
There's one more thing I think I wanted to add.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because it triggered what you said. I think what we do, at least what I try to do, is make it timely and timeless, right? Documentary films. I'm always looking, is this going to still be, what is the shelf life of this film? If in 20 years people will see it, will it still resonate in a way that's timeless, right? And I think characters do that, not necessarily the plot and the narrative itself, but characters do, right? So I'm hoping like 1,000 Cuts gets more and more relevant as the days go by, but it's also timeless. Good for that, right? Good and bad, because people will always be trying to abuse power. That is the timelessness of it. And there will always be the Maria Ressas who will fight that. So that also makes it timeless. So it's both good and bad. You're right, it never ends. It moves forward though, it moves forward.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I will also reference my own experience. People would often say to us in our Q&As, what do you see as the solution and the problem in the Middle East? Or like you become a prophet, right? You have to prophecy now. And my answer to that, and why do I say this? I wanted to ask you about distributing the film specifically in the Philippines, but I hesitated because I think the issue is distributing the film worldwide. I'm sure that there's still nevertheless a question to be asked there. What I would always tell people in terms of, the Middle East, I'd say, look, go home, look at your own society, ask yourself, who's my Duterte? Who's my Maria Ressa? Where am I in that story? What can I do? Come up with the necessary empathy and sympathy and humility to then apply some of those understandings to when you look at Israel-Palestine. And then you're welcome. Be as critical as you like.
No, exactly. That's exactly right. Where are you, right?
First, locate all of those same issues in your own society. And I'm not saying that they're all replicas of each other, but as you said, with the myths, there's only so many versions of human good and human bad, and there's just varying degrees in which it plays out in societies. But nevertheless, I'd like to hear about the distribution of the film in the Philippines, because that must, nevertheless, it's home turf.
Yes. So what we did, Maria's first, one of her 10 cases now. It was 9. It was 8 when we started, then 9, then 10 now. But one of her 10 cases, the verdict came down, was handed down in June. As you see in the film, it ends on June 15th. We were in the middle of lockdown. It was the middle of the pandemic. Remember those days? It seemed so much darker, but they were only 6 months away. Anyway, so I felt like no one was paying attention. I'm like, why is no one paying attention? This is a major case. It talks to like the heart of press freedom and cyber libel. And it was, this is a new law actually. So I went to the stakeholders of the film and also Julie Goldman, who's a producer of the film. I first tested it with Maria. I said, because Maria and I were talking, I said, what do we do? What did you do? I said, I think we should release the film for free for 24 hours. And she goes, you think they'll allow that? I said, let me ask. You can only ask, right? I told Julie, what?
I didn't think you were going to do it. Go.
Yeah, no, I didn't think so too. And then I said, Julie, I want to do this. She goes, that's great. She goes, but one thing we can't charge because we can't monetize this moment. I said, I agree. I said, will you tell the stakeholders? She goes, we'll both tell them. So we got together quickly, this Concordia, Frontline, PBS, Luminate topic. We all went on call and I'm like, so I want to release this film for free for 24 hours in the Philippines. Can we do it? Mind you, Rachel, this was before we had done anything, before virtual cinema, before broadcast, before anyone had really seen the film, except for some festivals. We premiered at Sundance. And there was a pause, and this was like, for free? I'm like, yeah, we can, for 24 hours? Yes. And they all came together. It was one part, they thought about it. They said, yeah, it's the right thing to do. And it was an amazing moment because they had, skin in the game, all of them. And they said, yes, we're going to do it. So that's what we did. Over the weekend, Friday night, it happened to be Independence Day, Philippine Independence Day. I did not know that. I forgot. Of course, I knew it, but I forgot. It wasn't planned that way. So there were people marching on the streets, and then they were dispersed by the authorities. And so everyone had to go home. By the time everyone went home, we went live on Frontline's YouTube channel. So Friday night to Saturday night, and then we landed on a live Q&A with me, Rainey Aronson, who's the executive producer of Frontline, Maria, and Julie Posetti of ICFJ. So that was live. That was the very first time that it was done, in pandemic. I felt that was my very first Zoom live thing. And we did it so quickly that Frontline told me, we get an average maybe of 20,000. But because we did it so quickly, there's no advance notice, maybe 10. I'm like, I'm happy with 10. I'm happy with 5, right? We got 233,000 full views in the 24 hours. So I was like, holy crap, what is happening? But, when the zeitgeist hits, right? There's something, people were in lockdown. It was Philippine Independence Day. They were sent home. There was discontent. So everyone was home. We only sent it out to me, my Viber chats and Facebook. We had no time, but somehow people found out. It was incredible. But it was also very sad. Look, I was expecting anger, right? You get anger, but I wasn't expecting sadness. People were disappointed in themselves for being again in this moment where you have to fight, because we fought for so many years, the dictator. And here we are again. What happened? Why did we take our eyes off the ball? And of course, it was compounded by everyone in lockdown and everyone being sad to begin with. But it just, it was such an emotional weekend. So that was the first time I guess that was our mini release. And we haven't since. And we will be releasing it streaming this month in the Philippines. We're trying to figure out how to do that quickly, because we're already out there. We're streaming in North America, and we know it's really key to, of course. But of course, our concern is also Maria. What it will do to her situation. Everyone's in lockdown, and she's fine. She always says, "I'll be fine," because she's figured out, and she can tell you this herself, that the global attention actually helps her, keeps her safer. And she found this out, she can tell you, when she became Time 100, Time Person of the Year, one of the Time Persons of the Year, because she didn't know whether that was going to make her situation worse or better. But she has found out since that global attention is key to keeping her safe. So that's the story about distribution in the Philippines.
Fantastic, and I can't wait to hear the follow-up of when it's moving through, on a regular basis. I'll just to wrap up, I think somebody might have sent me a nudgy message to wrap up the conversation. Yes, we're wrapping. 1 second, 2 questions quickly to the best of our ability. We're all very loquacious people here. If you can get a quick update on your legal cases, specifically with an eye for what kind of support people can provide from abroad, if any. And basically, if we take one thing away from 1,000 Cuts, it's, sorry, could you just, for the sake of, if God forbid somebody sees this and doesn't see the film, because for me it was a fantastic moment, where does 1,000 Cuts come from, right? What is that in reference to? And if there's one thing we take away from 1,000 Cuts, what would you like it to be? That was a tall order for wrapping up, I know, but
I'll quickly. The 1,000 Cuts came from an Al Qaeda document, right? It's a death by 1,000 cuts, and then if you go all the way back, that's a Chinese torture. And for me, it's studying the terrorism and then seeing it, feeling it. And it was a perfect description of what we're living through in social media and how, that's what I'm living through right now. What we do today matters. And I know that if we do good journalism, we can hold power to account and we can push back. That's the only thing. Ramona.
To me, what I found, right, and it's still, is that systems are very fragile. We really have to be vigilant. You cannot take anything for granted, even in this country, right? Who knew this? The democratic institutions would be so weak. I mean, not weak enough that they'll crumble, thank God, but in countries in the global South, they're weaker. Like the Philippines. Yeah. So I think vigilance, you can never take anything for granted. You can never take your freedom for granted, your rights, because really, if you don't watch it, don't take the eye off the ball, right? Always question what's happening. So that to me, it's a fragility of systems is it's sad, but that's really what I've really taken away.
Wait, but can I flip that and just show you the positive in this, in the social media?
Thank you, Maria. Yes.
But the positive is, we all talk about how divided our societies are, but in a strange way, what the social media platforms have proven is that human beings have a lot more in common, regardless of country and culture, right? Everyone says we're so different, but guess what? These platforms have found how similar we all are, unfortunately, in being manipulated. But, we have a lot in common. And I think that if we just get through this time period, get the right regulations, the guardrails in place for the technology, I'm still very optimistic about the future.
So if I can just chime in, I had prepared this in advance because I wanted to somehow a little bit bring it home because of the universality of these issues and questions. I went to the RSF, Reporters Without Sans Frontières website, see the World Press Freedom and Index, right, for 2020 and see where we stood, ranked 88 in the World Press Freedom Index. Israel has been categorized a toxic environment. For comparison, the Philippines has been ranked 136 with the categorization holding the line against Duterte's attacks. So somebody here has a copyright on defining the state of press freedom. Unwitting copyright. It just sounds like such a Maria quote. And Palestine, meaning the Palestinian Authority ruled West Bank and Hamas ruled Gaza, ranks 137. So Palestine is your neighbor in the index with the heading harassed journalists.
Wow.
When you read both descriptions, you understand that while Israel ranks significantly higher, it ranks relatively low because of its hold on the Palestinian Authority and the fact that Palestinian journalists are by no stretch of the imagination safe reporting on Israeli offenses and attacks on human and civil rights. And Palestine ranks as bad as it does because, in fact, it's not a free society. It's not free to really run things as the people making up the society would like to. All of these feel very interrelated. Your questions are eventually our questions, be it in the US or the Philippines or in Israel or in Palestine. And I'm immensely honored to have been able to hold this conversation with the two of you, get to know you through the film. And yeah, what did you say? You said, light is the only weapon a journalist has. I would think that many filmmakers would feel the same because you can't make a movie without light either. So.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Amazing questions. Thank you.
Thank you both. Really, pleasure. Take care and you stay safe.